a pharmacist deep down in retail, for the most part, the good ones, want to service their customers and do it well. And when they cannot service their customers and do it well, they feel stressed and they feel inadequate as a pharmacist. And no one wants to do that in their career. And I think that's leading to a lot of the problem.
From Diamond Pharmacy Services, this is PodcastRx. Before John Crupie became a pharmacist supervisor for Diamond, he spent nearly 30 years ascending the heights of retail pharmacy management with Kmart. With his many years working for a big chain, John was the perfect guest to discuss the ongoing pharmacist shortage plaguing retail pharmacies across the country. We get John's thoughts on the systemic factors driving the phenomenon and what possibly can be done to keep pharmacists from fleeing retail positions. We also talk about John's fascinating professional journey, how his current job compares to his old one, and the workplace factors that make Diamond a great destination for pharmacists. All this and much more on PodcastRx. I'm Adam Campbell. John Crupie, thanks so much for being on PodcastRx. It's your first time on the show, so welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Adam. It's a lovely Friday here in Western Pennsylvania. It's start of Lent season, so fish fries are starting. So we'll all be eating well tonight for sure.
Absolutely. I plan on partaking myself. Now, John, you're a pharmacist supervisor here at Diamond, and that's a very general sounding title that probably doesn't do justice to what the full range of what you do. So can you tell me what you oversee and what your day-to-day looks like?
Day to day, my main job here at Diamond is to oversee all the production pharmacists. We have about 50 production pharmacists. Every day, we're 24/7, round the clock here at Diamond. Our job is to get the product out to our customers. And then ancillarily, I oversee the retail pharmacy location, and I've been helping out in other parts of Diamond. Just in order to give them some guidance, et cetera.
Yeah. And when you talk about product going out, remind me how many millions of scripts go out here each year?
It's definitely about 50,000 pieces of product that leave here a day on average. On average, we're checking 23 to 26,000 prescriptions a day, just at the 645 location. And then the retail location separate from that.
Right. So before you came to Diamond, John, you spent over 25 years in retail pharmacy operations. But let's go all the way back. Can you tell me about what led you into pharmacy as a career, your career path, and how you ultimately ended up here at Diamond?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to do something in the medical field. I actually started volunteering on an ambulance when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And I did that for 13 years. But during that time, I got to see different aspects of the medical field. And pharmacy seemed like a very good fit for me. I like the local retail pharmacist. So that's how I ended up into pharmacy school. And then once I started there at Pitt, I got an internship at a medicine shop, an independent pharmacy. Really liked it. Worked with an incredible pharmacist owner and staff that taught me to be a pharmacist, basically. They taught me the value of a customer. And I still remember to this day, I would work to the right of my boss, and he would tap me on the leg every time the door would open and say, listen, when that door opens, you acknowledge who comes through that door. And to this day, when I work pharmacy, I'm always looking up. So it was a good lesson to be learned there. So that's how I got my start.
Yeah. Where was your career path then after that? And then on the way to Diamond?
Yeah, I went to Revco for a while. I moved away from home, went to Revco, was working at Revco. And then Kmart Pharmacy started opening pharmacies. And what got me thinking about it was an old preceptor of mine called me and said, I need a partner. And it was right after Thanksgiving, and I had worked Thanksgiving Day at Revco. And she's like, the good thing about Kmart Pharmacy is they are closed the holidays.
Oh,
I'm like, sign me up. I'll go for the interview. So that's how I ended up at Kmart Pharmacy in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania. I was a staff pharmacist there. Then I became the pharmacy manager there after a while. And I tend to get bored. So I opened up a diabetic office and started seeing diabetic patients. And this was in the 90s, before diabetes really came to the forefront. It was the start of meters. I went and did 72 hours of continuing education in diabetes and started seeing patients and started giving away meters and selling meters. And literally the prescriptions started following the meters. And it became one of the top diabetic stores at Kmart at the time, which they opened a Walmart next to me, the Kmart I was at, and the store started failing, and what stood out to the corporate executives was the pharmacy was growing at 30% and the store was falling at 40%. It just was an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And that got me a lot of attention. And one day I was visited by our regional manager. And he said, I think you need to go into management. And I'm like, I never see myself in management. I want to do the clinical.
Sure.
I'm into clinical.
Right.
And he's like, no, I think you should go into management. So next thing I know, my boss got promoted. They promoted me. I became a district manager. And I did that for 12 or 13 years.
Yeah.
Off and on, I would take other roles as a regional manager or a manager of special projects or whatever they wanted me to do. But my wife and I had made a commitment that I would not travel a lot until my daughters graduated high school. So I turned down jobs over the years that would encompass more travel until my daughter graduated high school, and the opportunity came about, and I became a regional manager for Kmart. At that time, I was handling the northern part of the United States, overseeing, I think it was like 300 stores or so. And then the next thing you know, I moved from that to director of operations at headquarters in Chicago.
Wow.
And then I became senior director of pharmacy operations, which was a job that was offered to me about 12 years prior. And so it came full circle, but I reached the job that I always wanted to do. And I did that for about 3 years. And then Diamond kind of came into the fold through one way or another. And my parents, especially my dad and my father-in-law, were failing in their health. And I thought it was best that I get home and be home instead of traveling every week. And so that's how I ended up at Diamond for the most part.
Yeah. Now, where's home for you?
Home is in Irwin, Pennsylvania. It's about 55 minutes away. And what was intriguing to me about Diamond was pharmacy is a small world. Brenda Catanzaro works at our retail store, was a pharmacist that worked for me for years. And I always stayed in touch with the pharmacist that worked with me. And she reached out to me one day and about a question not having anything to do with Diamond, asked her how she was doing. She asked me how I was doing. I said, telling her about my parents, et cetera. And she's like, well, my husband, Matt, who's a director here, is looking for a pharmacy supervisor. Would you want to talk to him? I said, you know what? I would. I'd like to find out more about it. And next thing you know, I was here for an interview, and the rest of the story is complete here.
And then here we are today. Yeah. So were you living out in Chicago and everything? And
no, I would fly to Chicago usually Monday morning.
Okay.
And then fly home Thursday night.
Wow.
Unless I was traveling somewhere else in the United States, visiting stores. When I first became a regional, my goal was to visit 100 stores in 100 days. So I did a lot of traveling at the beginning. And then when I got to the corporate office, usually I would be there 3 weeks out of the month in Chicago. And then the fourth week I would be out in the field visiting stores somewhere, either in the United States or Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you talked about your current job, the volume of scripts that we're handling here at Diamond and everything. You obviously have your work cut out for you, but that almost sounds sedate in comparison to what you were doing previously. So what are some of the biggest differences between what you were doing in the retail corporate sector and what you're doing currently?
The biggest difference is the business is not spread out. The business is here in one location for the most part.
Yeah.
And I'm managing a lot less pharmacists here per se, but they're all in one spot. So I get to see them every day instead of going and visiting a store and maybe getting back there a few months later, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm here working with the pharmacists. So as I make decisions or as things evolve here, I can see how they impact the pharmacists and how the pharmacists respond to it. So that's one of the biggest differences. Sure. And the other difference is you have long-term care and correctional business, which I was never in before. So that really intrigued me about here.
definitely. What do you miss about the old job?
I miss the travel.
Yeah.
And there was always a fire drill every day. When you have hundreds of locations spread out throughout the country, and the one fire drill that rings the most to me is when a hurricane hit Puerto Rico, and you don't know how your colleagues are, and because there's no phone service, and you're waiting to hear back from them.
Yeah.
So it's when you spread out like that, it's every day is intriguing.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to hit you when you wake up in the morning. Where here it's you kind of know what's going on. It's a little more subdued.
Yeah, I would say so. What do you think, though, that working at Diamond offers to a pharmacist that no other pharmacy setting offers?
I think there's 4 things. One time I did a survey of 60 pharmacists that were working for me at the time. I said, if you had to pick a pharmacy partner, what was the one quality you would want? And overwhelmingly, it was flexibility.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. And Diamond offers flexibility to the pharmacist. It really does, which flexibility in turn leads to quality of life. So when you have flexibility and quality of life, and you get to work with a team of colleagues, not just one other pharmacist, it gets very rewarding. You can talk to them during the day. You can run something by them that you may not know. You're not working by yourself. And then here, there's the ability to do other things. You're not just stuck and pigeonholed in one item. You can move around if you so desire. There is plenty of opportunity to take.
Yeah. We've talked with other pharmacists over the years for different projects that have said that exact same thing. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to PodcastRx from Diamond Pharmacy Services. If you're a fan of the show and have any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, or if you have any thoughts on a particular episode you'd like to share, please email us at podcastrx@diamondpharmacy.com. And while you're at it, please rate and review our show wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us make the best show possible for you. And as always, we appreciate your feedback and support. Now back to the show.
So, John, because you've lived in both worlds, you've bridged the gaps between the retail pharmacy and the non-retail worlds, the institutional worlds here at Diamond. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the so-called pharmacist shortage that's been in the news for the past year and continues to make headlines. Long story short, many retail pharmacies, especially some of the big chains and retailers, they're now cutting hours because they don't have the pharmacist behind the counter. And of course, that's creating a frustrating situation for patients. I'm generalizing here, but if you look at some of the narratives around this, like the media narrative and maybe the chain pharmacy PR narrative is, well, there's a pharmacist shortage. Well, what are we going to do? We don't have the pharmacist. But if you go on LinkedIn, for example, and just search pharmacy shortage or pharmacist shortage, rather, you'll see posts from pharmacists saying, and again, paraphrasing here, well, there's no shortage of pharmacists. We just aren't working in these conditions anymore that have come up in the retail industry. And just wanted to contextualize this a little bit from a quote from the American Pharmacists Association. It was a press release from January 30th of this year, and I'll just read it. Quote, some are blaming reduced hours on a pharmacist shortage. It is incorrect to say that there is a shortage of pharmacists or pharmacy technicians. More accurately, there is a shortage of pharmacists and technicians willing to work under the current conditions. Pharmacy is a rewarding profession, and pharmacists are experts in medication use. We need to stop conflating and blaming the current conditions on pharmacist or technician shortages when it's due to short staffing and healthcare system faults. And that was end quote. And that was Elisa Bernstein, who is the interim executive vice president and CEO of the American Pharmacists Association. So in other words, John, it seems it's viewed as a systemic issue. So I wanted to get your take on all this. What would you call what's happening now a shortage, or is it just like a see you later to that segment of the pharmacy profession?
I would call it a shortage. Is retail taking it on the brunt of it? Yes, they are taking it on the brunt of what's going on out there. But there's definitely a shortage. As I talk to some of my colleagues that I used to work with that are with different companies across the United States, they're seeing the same thing. And most of them are in retail. That was my background.
Right.
And it's twofold. It's a pharmacist shortage and it's a technician shortage. And it's a systemic issue for sure. As you lose technicians and good technicians because the pay that they can receive doing something else with their life other than pharmacy, it becomes a burden to the pharmacist. So having 2 technicians working with a pharmacist, say, is not the same as having 2 inexperienced techs. So you lose your experienced tech, all of a sudden you lose a lot of knowledge. It becomes a much harder day for a pharmacist.
Right.
And then you throw in the pandemic and all the shots and the testing and everything else that's expected of a pharmacist at retail. It leads to lack of flexibility. It leads to a hard work day. And the stress becomes too much. A pharmacist deep down in retail, for the most part, the good ones, want to service their customers and do it well.
Right.
And when they cannot service their customers and do it well, they feel stressed and they feel inadequate as a pharmacist. And no one wants to do that in their career.
Of course not.
And I think that's leading to a lot of the problem. If you want to look further back in the systemic issues, a lot of it deals with PBMs and the reimbursements. When you're getting reimbursed AWP minus 20% or 25% or whatever it is from a particular PBM, your profitability goes down. And when you're in the corporate world, it's all about beating your numbers to last year or keeping your profitability. So as expenses increase, rent, pay, not unlike people in their own houses, the business starts losing profitability. And the only way to increase profitability is to fill more prescriptions. So now you're stuck in a big circle. Basically, you're filling more prescriptions, you're paying your employees more, you're paying more on expenses, your profitability isn't going up, which leads to corporate going, oh, what are we going to do to keep our profitability? Well, you have to cut expenses. So when you start cutting expenses, you start cutting technician help back because there really isn't a lot of other expenses in pharmacy other than can you buy better? So that leads to less staffing, more stress on the pharmacist, and the pharmacists are saying, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And I think in talking to a lot of them, there's a lot of different places pharmacists are going now. You have retirements, early retirements. If pharmacists have invested their money in their 401ks and they're in their late 50s, they're saying, I've had enough. I really don't need to work. I can live on less and make it. And they're walking away. And then you have marijuana clinics opening, which a lot of them take a pharmacist. You have a lot of opportunities that the pandemic created, work from home. It's like the profession keeps reinventing itself. So you have people doing MTM, specialty, long-term care, consulting, that kind of thing from home. So it's drawing people that are unhappy, and the unhappy people are the retail people. So what it's doing is it's drawing them into other jobs, even if it pays less, just for their own sanity. And they're willing to accept less money for better working conditions and more flexibility. I think that's creating the problem for retail.
Yeah. Is there any, because you spent so much time in management, is there anything you could look at now from being away from that and go, I would change this and this if it were my decision to make this better? Is there anything?
The only thing, I think that the retail chains need to be more flexible. You need to be willing to adapt to what employees want today, especially there's a lot of women in pharmacy. You've got to be able to offer part-time work, offer shortened work weeks. Like our retail store, we have 3 young ladies that work there, all working 30 hours a week because it gives them the work-life balance they need to raise their families. I think the first chain that understands that will do better. And the first chain that understands the point that pharmacists in general want to serve their patients and gives them the ability to do that without running around doing all the ancillary things. Right. And by the way, the pharmacists wanted to do this, right?
Sure.
So we wanted involved in immunizations. We wanted involved in COVID testing because it drives profitability. But looking back, the PBMs and cutting reimbursement, you could see this coming eventually. And at Kmart, when I was there, we were not a very profitable company at the time. And we were asked a lot of times to make hard decisions. And we reduced hours in pharmacy as well. By reducing the hours, you saved money and you made the pharmacy more profitable, which made the company more profitable.
Just to follow up on what you said, though, about pharmacy technicians, John, that's something, too, is that Is that an issue that would be solved by better pay or?
It's definitely by better pay.
Yeah.
And the problem comes back to, it comes full circle. It's pay and training.
Mm-hmm.
But the best pharmacy technicians, they have experience, and and when you lose the ones with experience, it takes a while to get that training back up to the levels you need. And then with the PBMs cutting reimbursement, you're stuck. What do you do? Can you afford more technicians? And a lot of the independents you see are closing their doors because they just can't afford to make it with the reimbursements that are out there.
Right. I wanted to ask you about our local retail pharmacy, Diamond Drug, because you did mention you oversee that. You also talked about the work-life balance that the pharmacists working there are able to have with the 30-hour work weeks. What other steps are you taking to make sure that our local independent store doesn't experience some of the woes that the bigger stores are, and ultimately keeping the doors open?
Yeah. One thing, Gilbert, as owner, one of the owners here, told me my first week here, John, it's all about the people.
Yeah.
And it is. It's all about the people, and it's all about the customers that we service over there in the community. I am blessed to have 3 great pharmacists and a group of great technicians over there that work unbelievably as a team. It's amazing to see them operate. They offer different types of packaging, like Dispill, to patients who need it. We offer delivery services. We have the out front of the store with the OTC products, but it's just an amazing team. And when you have a team that works together so well, good things happen. And it's the same here at the main headquarters. I'm blessed to have a great team here. And when that happens and everybody works together, amazing results happen. And that's what's happening up at the retail store right now.
I did want to toss it back to the to talking about the shortage before. Given that you do supervise the production pharmacists here, have you seen any evidence of a shortage when you're looking for new pharmacists to join your team of production pharmacists? I would assume that's not the case.
Yeah, not as yet. We do look for some casual on-call pharmacists, and we haven't been able to find a good pool of casual on-call pharmacists that just are basically pharmacists on demand when you need them to come in and fill in for vacations, etc. But as far as full-time or part-time pharmacists, we've had no trouble. And honestly, when you have a group of 50 pharmacists, pharmacy is a small world. They know enough pharmacists that are miserable, and mainly at retail, and they anytime that we want to hire a pharmacist, the first thing we do is ask the pharmacist on staff, is there anybody that you worked with in the past that you think would be a good fit? Because when we have such a good team, you want somebody that's going to fit in with that team. And when you bring someone from retail, they've experienced what is hard about pharmacy. Coming here with all the flexibility and the teamwork that goes on. I think we've lost one pharmacist in my 4 years here.
Wow.
So retention is a very, very high number.
Yeah. And I've worked here for 9 years now, and just seeing pharmacists around the buildings, it's the same faces.
Yes. It's incredible. They get their schedule a year in advance, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And we actually released that schedule yesterday to the pharmacist that just happens to be. And the amount of teamwork that goes on trading so that someone can take care of their kids, can take care of their loved ones, vacations, etc. It's amazing. They swap nights, they swap weekends. It's a nice thing to be a part of.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And, when you were talking about your corporate career with Kmart, I mean, you're visiting all these different stores with all these different groups of people. You're not going to experience that same kind of one team approach just because you have 100 teams or more. Yeah.
The teams are separated. They're not close. You might have 2 or 3 stores in a pod that can help each other out. Where here you have 49 other people that can swap a shift with you or fill in for you if you're sick, or it's easy to get time off too, which is nice.
I wanted to ask John, I'm not sure if you have any impressions on this, but, related to the idea of a shortage would be, is there enough student pharmacists coming up in the profession? Is that something you have a finger on the pulse of, or?
You know what? There are 100+ pharmacy schools. I'd have to look at the exact number. But one thing that I thought was interesting, I heard Duquesne University, who's one of the pharmacy schools here in Pittsburgh area, advertising on the radio for pharmacy students. And that wasn't always the case. And that seems to tell me that they're not getting the applicants. And it's expensive. It's a 6-year commitment. It's a big commitment. And one of the problems, I think, is most students, when they're in high school, their only experience with pharmacy is what they see at CVS, Walgreens, a retail location. And they're going in and talking to a pharmacist who might not be happy.
Yeah.
And if their first experience is, I want to be a pharmacist, and I go in and I visit this pharmacist at CVS and they say, I'm not happy and don't go into pharmacy.
Yeah.
The chances of them going into it are bad.
Right.
So I know we're hosting a student here in the next few weeks that's in high school that wants to go into the profession. I think they will end up in that profession because they're going to go in and talk to some of the pharmacists that we have, and they're going to have a completely different take on it.
Yeah. And we did actually have one of those students on here a few months ago from Duquesne who really enjoyed their experience here. And credit to like Zane Gray in optics and everyone else involved with the internship program for getting everyone exposed to all the areas here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just shows the wide breadth of what pharmacists do, not just here, but I mean all around.
It's amazing how many different avenues you can take as a pharmacist.
Yeah.
You get the degree, and once you have the degree, just like me, I never thought I would end up in management. I loved it. Here I kind of get the best of both worlds. There are days where I'm filling prescriptions right along the side to people I manage. And it was actually refreshing going back to do that part of the day.
Right. Well, if we're talking like full circle then in your career, I did want to ask you then, you have a 30-year career in pharmacy, and given everything we talked about today, John, what would be your number one piece of career advice for any pharmacist, student pharmacist starting their career? What would be your number one piece of advice for them as they get into this profession?
I would go to work every day with a lot of positive energy and be ready to serve your customer, whoever your customer is. Be ready to serve them and be ready to adapt for change, whether it be vaccines, testing for COVID. You don't know what the world's going to throw at you, but if you're adaptable to it, this can be a very good profession. If you go in and you enjoy it, there will be opportunities as long as you work hard that come your way. And what those opportunities will be, I don't know what the next 30 years are going to look like for pharmacy. I certainly couldn't predict what's going on now, but hard work, a lot of energy, and servicing your patients, and people will notice it and give you the opportunities that are out there.
That's great advice, John. And I really want to thank you for coming on PodcastRx today, spending a little bit of your day with us. Thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back. This was great.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. My first time doing a podcast. So you've made it easy for me.
Oh, no, likewise. This was great. So thank you again, John, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
This podcast features conversations with healthcare professionals. Their statements and opinions discussed herein are for informational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered professional medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for the advice of an appropriately qualified and licensed healthcare professional. Therefore, listeners must not rely on the statements made herein.
PodcastRx is a production of Diamond Pharmacy Services, the nation's largest correctional pharmacy provider. Catch our new episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate the show and leave us a review. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear about on the show, or you'd like to share your thoughts on an episode, you can email us at podcastrx@diamondpharmacy.com.